two of our key supporters and advocates being interviewed. They are Jim McCluskey from Kiers by Len, and Jeremy Glover by Yetzela. Len is our president. Many of you will know of him, but he's been a tireless campaigner, I think, for good and for right in the whole fields of construction disputes, and sets very high standards of ethics and justice. That's my perception of Len. I think sometimes he can be a bit like a terrier that's got a bone between the teeth, but I think that's always a sign that there's an issue that needs flagging and needs chasing. And with that, I will introduce you to Len, who will be conducting our first interview. Over to you, Len. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see some new faces with us today, some folks who have signed the pledge in the last few weeks, including Catherine Patel from BAM Nuttall, who is very welcome. And we had a conversation on Friday about, hopefully this will penetrate the whole of the BAM organisation, so tremendous. Yeah, it's my pleasure this morning to be talking with Jim McCluskey. Jim has been an amazing contributor to the work of the coalition. We've had a bit of a discussion before, and we decided rather than an interview, this really would be a chat between a couple of old pals. So Jim, maybe you could just kick off by giving everybody your background with Kier.
Good morning, Len. Thank you, and good morning all. So I'm Jim McCluskey. I'm a senior commercial manager with Kier Construction, the infrastructure division particularly, which now includes nuclear energy, transport, water, environment, and one or two other things too. And presently I'm working on one of the defence contracts where we're setting up contractual arrangements with our client. So that's my sort of current role, Len.
Okay, Jim, as I said, you've made a great contribution so far, and long may that continue. Particularly through your own organisation, and also the Chartered Institute of Civil Engineering Surveyors. And I think we're seeing a lot of interest from that group. And I know later on you're going to be talking about a live pledge experience, but what really motivates you and your organisation to participate in this?
I think that certainly from where my standing, my experience with conflict avoidance, I guess, throughout my career, I've always tried to resolve things locally before escalation in most capacities I've been in. Stands you in good stead to build relationships with the parties who you work with. And certainly my experience on the London Underground, which we'll talk on a bit later, but was my first sort of introduction into the conflict avoidance panel and the conflict avoidance process. And that sort of experience has sort of driven me and led me to be a member of the steering group along with the ICS, and enabled me to encourage Kier Infrastructure to sign the pledge.
Yeah, I mean, Kier are a massive organisation in the UK. Are you looking now to talk to some of the other group companies about becoming signatories as well?
Yeah, so I think we're trying to do, with a big organisation as Kier, one can't solve all problems in a big organisation, or coerce everybody to do things that you want to do. So it's one step at a time. So we're in the infrastructure division. We are looking at embedding conflict avoidance clauses in our base tier 2 subcontracts and supply agreements. That in itself is going to take a little bit of time because our legal department and our governance requires us to be very careful how we do that. But that's what we're doing to start off with. Once we can get that in place, we would like to talk to our construction colleagues and other areas of Kier as appropriate to see if they're interested in signing the pledge.
Yeah, I think you know this. One of the things I feel passionately about is the level of collaboration that the coalition has achieved. And it's been absolutely phenomenal, the number of people that have joined us and the networking that is going on as well. Do you think there's a big move towards better collaboration in the industry leading to more successful delivery of projects?
I think so. I think on the bigger projects, there's always a challenge with the number of people involved. My experience has been in the last 25 years working on the larger programs, and sometimes you can't get everybody on the same page. But I think the general will of parties to projects are to work in a collaborative way. Of course, there will be commercial tensions, there will be disagreements. That's the very nature of what we do in a dynamic environment. But I think that the industry is, it is an albatross to move it forward, but it is slowly moving forward. And it's good to see that collaboration does appear high on the agenda of a lot of live projects and companies.
Yeah. Now, we mentioned a few minutes ago that you're going to be telling everybody about a live experience you had with CAP, TfL project. Could you outline that for us?
Okay, so I guess my introduction to conflict avoidance and the process itself was I was working for the Taylor Woodrow part of Vinci in joint venture with BAM, and we were contracted by London Underground TfL to upgrade 2 stations for them, which was Tottenham Court Road and Victoria Station. And Victoria Station was the project I was actually engaged on. And it was a normal traditional NEC option C, NEC 3 option C contract, paying gain, and during the course of the contract, and it was a long program, probably between 6 and 8 years, including design and enabling works sort of periods. But during the, I guess, year 3 of construction delivery, issues were arising, which we were raising compensation events for. Some of these were interpretation of scope, of what the contractor's scope was. We raised them as compensation events as changes, and works information as it was under NEC 3, by the way. And we raised them as compensation events as changes to works information, and they were rejected by the representatives from London Underground, the project managers. So therein lies the initial, catalyst as to what was going on. Some of these things then festered because some of the issues grew in sort of magnitude. And one of the examples I would cite is doing builders work in connection with services for London Underground's third-party contractors. Which, for example, if you actually look at how LU and TfL manage their stations, there's a lot of complex service contracts that they have in place for servicing their fire sprinklers, servicing their passenger alarms, servicing their air conditioning and MEP sort of installations that are part of their integral stations. Our project there was to upgrade the station, but not actually to facilitate the works of third-party contractors. Our contract and our scope said that we were required to work around third-party contractors and cooperate with them and collaborate with them, but actually not do any work for them. And so the issue was we were getting instructions or receiving instructions to say, can you drill a large hole through this wall for a third-party contractor? So of course we do that. We've got an instruction. I'll raise a compensation event, and therein lies how the problem started. The compensation event rejected, and then it festered on a list of rejected compensation events for probably 12 to 18 months. And then Sue Barrett, who is also, I'm not sure if he's on the call, but Sue Barrett was the commercial director at TfL LU at the time, suggested, I think, had been in discussions with Martin Burns about why don't we try a different way of resolving some of these matters. And the conflict avoidance process was introduced there by agreement of the parties in about 2015. And I believe our one was probably one of the first first few of the guinea pigs of these cases that were done. And so that is how it happened, and how it took place. And then, of course, a CAP panel was appointed by agreement, which was provided by RICS. So RICS provide a list of panel members in a similar way as they do with their adjudicators list, and the parties agreed jointly which was the correct personnel with the right experience to preside on these disagreements.
And I'm interested in this point, the CAP professionals or the panel, were they able to improve the lines of communication between yourself and the other parties that were involved in this?
I think they certainly acted as a catalyst, and by no means were we at loggerheads with London Underground or TfL. We were still getting on very well as a site delivery team. It's just that sometimes you do have these disagreements that sometimes a third party is probably better placed to make the decision for the project manager sometimes, because they themselves probably are not empowered to do so in some cases. So I think introducing CAP onto that project and onto our Tottenham Court Road Station project did help the communication, did help understand the issues, crystallise the issues, and then finally preside in their opinion as to what the outcome of those issues was.
Yeah. One of the things we spoke about last week, Jim, was the belief that this process really needs to be client driven. But having said that, the whole of the industry needs to buy into this. It's got to affect everybody. And you know that we're opening dialogue now with major client organisations. Would you go along with that clients can be the real stimulus to make this happen in the UK industry?
I think TfL with LU being the pioneers with RICS should be commended for taking that bold step, really, to try and do something different. And it would be good if the larger clients themselves, and there's some very big ones out there, the water companies, the transportation company clients, government clients, would actually, and I think in some cases, and I don't know this factually, but I understand it has a Parliament restoration project as project is considering CAP, or if not embodying CAP in their contractual arrangements. So I think it'd be very good if clients took the lead role, which would then help the supply chain follow suit.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Last question. It was incredible and so positive to see NEC issuing their practice note last year. And I hope that will make a big impact in the industry. What do you think of that?
It's excellent that NEC have produced that, and if those on the call haven't seen it, I think you can download it off the NEC website. It's a practice note that was issued in March 2025, and it introduces sample Z clauses for consideration of for the purposes of incorporation into standard contracts. For the purposes of having a conflict avoidance process built in, and it's not mandatory. It can be used as optional clauses that are put in, so the parties have to, by agreement, agree to use the CAP process. So it's not like one party, like a subcontractor, issues 20 CAP referrals without the agreement of the other. It has to be a consensual and by agreement process. But I think again, NEC need to be commended on publishing that, and I know that Kier themselves are looking at that guidance for the purposes of using the suggested clauses or a version of those clauses for our own tier 2 subcontracts.
Yeah. I see we've got a hand up from Ross Matthey, the Commercial Director of Scottish Building. Ross?
Yeah, good morning all. Jim, can I just ask, when the conflict avoidance process was implemented, did that result in a satisfactory outcome for you, and was it fairly speedy from when implemented and when decisions were made? And did everyone, whether it went totally in your favour or not, did everyone abide by that and move on and draw a line under it?
I think the parties agreed to whatever the recommendation was, whether it be 6 in our favour or not. We would honour the recommendation and not actually enter into further litigation or dispute resolution. So on the Victoria Station one, the one in question was in our favour, but on the Tottenham Court Road Station ones, we had two that wasn't in our favour. However, there were good experiences, and also were very important as part of the final settlement stroke final account process with the client, because they then had a better understanding of what those matters were.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Well, Jim, that's us almost at the end. I think you possibly had a couple of things you wanted to ask me about. I'm very happy to respond.
Okay, thanks, Len, and thank you for your questions. What has led you, Len, you're a great ambassador for the coalition. What has led you to your involvement in the coalition, you from your career path?
I was very fortunate in the early days of my career when I'd set up my own practice that I was asked by a contractor and a developer to come and help them resolve an issue. They had been working together for a long time. They didn't want to fall out, and they had a big building program, and they couldn't get a resolution to an issue. I was given a fortnight to look at it and come up with a proposal which they accepted, and that really set my thinking pattern that getting into adjudication, I think, is a complete failure by the parties in the industry, that they're unable to forge a resolution. And I know sometimes you get to a point where adjudication is the only answer, but I think it gave me the belief that with the right people involved and the right attitudes, you can get things resolved. And I think the industry needs to refocus on building good projects for clients, and the industry needs to make profits, and we need to resolve the payment and cash flow issues in the industry. And I think this process can help to facilitate all of these long-term objectives for the industry. So that was where I started, and the engine is still ticking and driving me in that same direction.
Thank you. Good answer. What motivates you to give your time and support to the coalition?
Well, I think our chairman badged me as the chief pest in the construction industry. And that's what drives me, I think, encouraging other people to come on board. And as I said earlier, we've gathered into this coalition the most amazing group of people that I've worked with in my career, all like-minded individuals, and getting the positives from them when something is achieved. I remember Ed Shriver, who's on the call in the early days, came forward with something that he had done, and it was a real catalyst to all of us to actually start delivering, the objectives of this process. So that's what keeps driving me. Hopefully I can continue for a good while longer. That's out with my control, of course.
Okay. And given you asked me about conflict avoidance with clients, and which is where I think it really should start.
Yeah.
How do you think we can drive the message through clients? Because and I appreciate that's a challenge, and it's not an easy one.
Yeah. Well, one of the most active trade organisations so far has been Ian McElway's Finishes in the interiors sector, and carrying out contract reviews for their members now. They are providing people they're tendering to with the conflict avoidance clauses, and explaining what it's about, and asking them to embed these into contracts. And as Martin Burns has said, it's a safety belt. It's there if you need to use it. So I think that's making a big impact. And again, I know Martin related a story. He was giving a talk somewhere, and somebody said, "Why would you sign the conflict avoidance pledge?" And he quite properly answered, "Why wouldn't you? What's the downside of this? There's absolutely no downside whatsoever. It's aimed at improving the industry, which badly needs support at the present moment."
Yeah. And I agree with that, Len, because I know that I'm aware that the Environment Agency are looking at conflict avoidance provisions within their arrangements, their supply chain.
Yeah.
And they're a very large client, and I just hope that we can with departments like the EA and some of the other larger clients, hopefully Scottish Water and those stuff, then we can start getting the message out to a wider platform. And I think then the industry will gather pace on the adoption and incorporation of these measures to manage their contracts much more successfully, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, Chairman, I think that's us finished. Happy to hand back to you to introduce Gisela and Jeremy. Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Len. That was very illuminating. I'm just looking at the chat, and we've got a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is from Mark Beard. Mark is Beard Construction, well known in the Thames Valley area, family-owned business that's been operating for literally hundreds of years. Delivers much quality building in the Cotswolds, in the Oxford colleges and so on, and a great reputation for actually doing what they say they're going to do. And excuse me, Mark, can you give us your question? If not, I'll read Mark's question out. All good stuff, which we wholeheartedly support. However, too many clients are drawn into silly one-sided contract amendments by their lawyers, which take ages to agree. What's the coalition doing to convince the legal profession to minimise their amendments to industry, agreed contracts to what is really necessary? So, Len and Jim, what's your view on Z clauses on NEC contracts and so on?
Well, first of all, what's the coalition doing? We've set up a contract review group, which again has brought together a real cross-section of people to look at contract amendments and really making a lot of noise to stop standard forms of contract being amended. They achieve absolutely nothing other than impose a higher level of risk on the supply chain who can't actually afford to take that risk on. So it's going to be a constant process of lobbying to stop this going on time and time and time again. I think it achieves absolutely nothing. And again, talking about the contract review service that FIS operates, we have been able to go back to clients and discuss with them contract amendments and in many cases, get these taken out or modified. Or in some cases, a contractor has just said to the client, I'm off. I'm not going to price the job. So I think the industry itself collectively needs to stand up to this. Jim, what are your thoughts?
I agree, Len, and I think that I think more will take notice as our message gets a bit more wider out there. When I was looking at Ed's question there about what do you see as the main blockers of wide acceptance of CAL, I'm not sure if there's blockers as such. It's our ability to encourage clients to use it, and I think that's where we may be struggling to a degree. And then, of course, the other comment from Mark on the one-sided clauses from clients that are putting contracts is something we can't stop, but hopefully we can, with wider messaging, we can hopefully encourage that behaviour to, I don't know, be curtailed somewhat. I don't think we'll ever stop it completely, but I think we can do our best to, as the coalition grows and it gathers pace, and we hopefully get the message out on a bit of a wider platform, we can encourage wider use of conflict avoidance and collaboration.
Yeah. Taking the second question, I don't think, to answer Ed's point, I don't think there are blockers. I think what we are going through and have gone through for the last 4 years, and I think Martin and Gisela will agree with this, is creating awareness of CAP throughout this whole industry. And that has been a colossal task because it is such a massive industry with so many different organisations involved in it. So creating awareness, getting people to commit by signing the pledge, and actually implementing this is the key. And it's been hugely encouraging to see a number of major players wanting to become silver and gold partners, and they go through a rigorous process. and they're declaring that they are going to be a good business to work with. So the awareness campaign is a day-by-day activity that we all need to be involved in. There's two other
Thanks,
questions.
Len, and thanks, Jim. I see Catherine has her hand up, and then Julie. Catherine first.
Hi, sorry, I was coming in on Mark's query. I appreciate I'm new, so I'm just stepping in already. I am a construction lawyer by trade. I've been doing it for 20 years. So I do also blame the lawyers. I was always client side until I moved to BAM. And there is a tendency for, let's do what we've always done. Let's not rock the boat. Let's overprotect the client because they definitely need it. And I think one of the things I was wondering is whether there are any client side lawyers represented, like lawyer firms represented within the coalition, because that's another way, I think, of challenging that. Let's just do what we've always done. Let's just stick with performers. Yeah, the clients definitely need it, and actually challenging that perception from that angle as well.
That's a great question, Catherine. I've got a gift here because Julie is a lawyer who we've known for many years on the Society of Construction Law and arbitration scene. So you Julie, answer that, please. Then you make your own comment, and then I'll perhaps come back to you.
So yeah, there are is the answer. I was going to talk about the same question as Catherine, but yeah, we didn't have. I think I was the only lawyer for quite a long time. Wasn't I? But we've now got with our contracts subcommittee, we've got a few more come in, which is great, and people like you. And it's I believe that I think most lawyers are not going to listen to the industry; they're going to listen to other lawyers more. That we're going to be more persuasive about why they should do it, and have these less amendments. And the contracts group are very actively doing that and trying to persuade lawyers. I'm also, recently I joined Lexis, which I don't know if many of you know, the lawyers all know it, LexisNexis, and I work 3 days a week there. So I'm still a construction lawyer, a partner at Gunnar Cook. And so I'm seeing both sides. And at Lexis, what they do is they're a bit like Practical Law, West, all these ones that provide updates and practical guidance on cases, law, and just construction. Well, they do everything. I only do construction generally. So I've persuaded my manager that what we really need to do this year is I need to do a practical guidance note on the Conflict Avoidance Coalition. Lovely bloke, agreed with me completely. So I've already started drafting this under the guise of conflict avoidance generally, but it is focused on the Conflict Avoidance Coalition. And this is for construction lawyers to read. So a lot of people, a lot of firms have this Lexis for senior lawyers as well, but often for junior lawyers, where they give work to junior lawyers and they can look up on their precedents they should use, guidance on latest cases, that sort of thing. So my idea is that we are then bringing into this guidance the idea that you don't have to draft these ridiculous print off your printer, these 100-page amendments and just send them out, because it's not doing you any favors or anyone else. So what I'm going to do is have the practical guidance note comes out, explains what the coalition is, talks about the pledge, cap, panels, and then have a separate sort of linked notes on panels. It'll include things obviously like the NEC, the clauses, and then we also do precedents. So I was thinking of doing a schedule of amendments for with the minimal amendment, because we do have the schedules of amendments because demand requires that we have these ridiculous schedules of amendments, which for big projects, some of the clauses are good, but we don't give advice at Lexis. So we have to provide that with drafting notes. But I will be adding into all those drafting notes, as I'm the only non-contentious lawyer there now for construction. Think about this, where all these clauses are not necessary, in my view. But then I will also do a separate precedent, which is a minimal schedule of amendments for people that are actively trying to reduce that. So hopefully that will be getting out to lawyers the idea that Lexis, people that whose guidance they follow, are telling them that they should be doing this. And we can then give also, if people look up conflict avoidance panel, they'll see what it is, they'll see how to use it, and that sort of thing. So I may be coming back to you all to sort of ask for queries and things to put in there. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to share it with the coalition. I'm going to talk to them about that because it's very much, as you can imagine, ring-fenced so that our documentation doesn't get out to the wider world without people paying their subs. But I might be able to do it on a confidential basis, perhaps just to the sort of the coalition committee, as it were. But hopefully that's moving it forward on the legal side. That's my plan.
Thank you very much, Julie. Catherine, did you have any comments? And certainly we'd welcome your support if you wish to get involved with one of our groups, such as the contract group.
I think my idea to start off with was if you get people from Evershed, CMS, Norton Rose, all the firms that are generally just rising client sides, then we start changing the dial on what they're doing for their clients. And like Mark said, persuade them that actually that's really not the best for them in the long run at all. And I think, like I said, sort of getting in through the SCL is a really good way of just sort of hitting them all at once, as it were.
So I think Jeremy has made a comment in the chat, which is great because he's about to be interviewed by Yitzhak, and that can perhaps be the first point. But I will just emphasise that we are a neutral, independent group of generally like minds, but we do disagree on things, and we work out how to disagree respectfully and responsibly. But essentially, we don't have an agenda other than change, and we're not funded by anyone. And that gives us a really good lobbying voice. And watch this space. We've got events coming up in the next few months. In the newsletter, Lang O'Rourke have done a short piece about how they're looking to change contracts. So please get involved. Please come to our events. We're funded essentially through sponsorship of our conference. That's the 16th of June. And really anyone that can sponsor us will be contributing to making this voice a bit louder. I'll come to the event itself, buy a ticket. But with that, I'm going to hand over to Jeremy and Gisela for the second part of today. Thank you both.
Thanks, Richard. Good morning, everyone. I think I probably know most people on this call, but just by way of introduction, I'm Gisela Jago, a senior specialist with the Dispute Resolution Service at RICS. I've been involved in the work of the coalition for a number of years now. I'm a member of the steering group, most notably, and I think we'll touch on this at some point with our chat with Jeremy, I was heavily involved in organising the coalition's inaugural conference in London, the Houses of Parliament in 2024, which was a real milestone for the coalition and a real pleasure to be involved in. On that note, I'm very pleased to be speaking with Jeremy this morning, partner of Fenwick Elliott and immediate past president of DRBF. Jeremy's been heavily involved in the establishment and growth of the coalition, providing time and energy to the steering group, and particularly to the conference working group. So Jeremy, welcome, and thank you for agreeing to be interviewed by us this morning. Just to kick off, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role?
Okay, thank you, Zella, and good morning to everyone. So I think having heard the discussion that we've had over the last 35 minutes or so, perhaps the key point is I'm a lawyer. And I've been a construction lawyer for over 25 years. And one of the things I've learned as a lawyer is one of the key things that when you're doing your best for your client is that you help them avoid disputes. And absolutely fundamental, and I've always thought that. And the best ways sometimes to avoid disputes is actually putting the contracts together, how you actually start off with your project. So yes, I mean, as Isabella said, yeah, I'm partner at Fenwick Elliott, immediate past president of the Dispute Board Resolution Foundation, the DRBF, and that's particularly relevant to the Conflict Avoidance Coalition, because the DRBF were one of the founder members of that coalition back in the day. Chris Myers and I think Julie as well. You know, a lot of the early commitment to the CAC came through the DRBF, and I've sort of found myself as the vice president of the CAC currently. And yeah, I had great fun with Isella and some of her colleagues at the RICS in helping to put on the inaugural CAC conference, which took place, as Isella said, at Portcullis House. And I think one of the really good things about that event, and one of the really good things and positive things for the future about the coalition, is the breadth of experience of the speakers that we had. There were lawyers, there were tier one contractors, there were a number of employers, there were people sort of from government-based organisations, there were people from other institutions, and it's like coming together of a wide group of people, and you know, all share the same aims, and they're able to share their own experiences, which is one of the advantages of sort of these sessions that we run every month, and also provide practical guidance. And we were lucky enough that our keynote speaker at that first conference was Sir John Armitt, and he made the point, I think Catherine's been also talking about, so at the early stage of the project, it sets the tone, and it's determinative of how that project actually proceeds. And I think a number of the speakers all talked about collaboration, and for me, that's all about communication. It's all about people. It's all about relationships, and you build that at the beginning of projects, and when you're sort of establishing and putting the projects together. And one of the things, excuse me, so John Armitt said at the end of his opening session, and he's just something that always struck with me, so that's why I'm repeating it now. And one of the things that we want to do as a coalition, it's not a case of moving forward with hope, but it's moving forward with ambition. The people on this call, the people are members of the coalition, you know, got clear aims of what we want to do to help the industry, and we sort of work, you know, help to move forward together. As Richard said, we don't always agree on everything, but what we do agree is on the sort of fundamental importance and aims of the coalition itself.
Very good. Yeah. I mean, that was an excellent keynote from Sir John Armitt, and that's a very worthy takeaway from that. You're very clearly a strong ambassador of conflict avoidance and of the coalition. When did you first become aware of and interested in conflict avoidance and the coalition itself, and what continues to keep you so engaged?
I mean, the specific reason I became interested in the coalition was that I was asked to join the coalition because of my role within the DRBF. As I said, DRBF's a key founder member of the coalition. And it turned out that it was something that was completely all square with the things that I believed in anyway. One of the key things when you're acting as a dispute board member is that you are always looking for ways to avoid disputes. And that's right from the outset of your involvement in the project. And as I've said, that aligned fairly and squarely with the objectives of the coalition. And it's also an opportunity, and Len was talking about the importance of creating awareness, an opportunity to share ideas with others and sort of learn from others what tools you can implement, what things potentially you can look to recommend to go into contracts. The coalition offers a number of tools. I mean, there is an actual toolkit or toolbox which sets out the key principles for sort of the variety of forms for conflict avoidance. It provides ideas for avoiding disputes at every stage of the project. So, I mean, I think it's just a fit with how I've always approached, my approach to construction law, construction projects has always been.
Very good. And just mentioning on that toolkit, the conflict avoidance toolkit or the conflict avoidance toolbox, I believe that is undergoing a review of sorts. Have you been involved in that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I have been helping. I mean, I think Ashley Belcher is sort of leading it from Canary Wharf, so sort of an owner. So it's important to them. So yeah, I mean, happy to be involved. The interesting thing is the key fundamentals that were set out 7 or 8 years ago of that toolbox are remaining the same. In many ways, the things that are being altered slightly is how you're presenting it for the sort of this slightly changed construction industry that we find today. But the key ideals are the same, which is good in that they've never changed. It's perhaps slightly disappointing in that we still need to put them sort of forward and focus on them. But then they're fundamental.
Yeah.
So it's really important.
It's interesting, isn't it, that the principles remain the same. Largely, the content remains the same and unchanged. I think what Ashley was saying that we'd be looking at next would be how that is presented and how it's accessed, and putting signposts within the toolkit to help those interested in it find the resources they need. The Coalition, of course, we've got our new website. We've got a wealth of tools and information and news pieces that will help inform that. So whilst the fundamental principles remain the same, I think we as a coalition have moved the conversation so much further forward that what we can produce now will be of far more benefit to users. So that's going to be a watch this space, I believe, for the rest of this year, and hopefully we'll have that new toolkit to talk about relatively soon.
Excellent. And the thing about it is you can sort of dip in and find the things that are relevant to you and your project.
Yeah, no matter what stage you're at.
You have to do this, and this. You say, okay, well, that looks like a good idea. Let we can do that, and that's what works for us.
Yeah, because of course, I think you mentioned how the start helping clients, avoid disputes. You're looking at the start of the contractual process, but there are those who find themselves perhaps embroiled in a dispute. The contract's in place. You're halfway through a project. This toolkit can be used. You can pick it up, and you can find something in there that will help you to take that matter forward in a sort of more collaborative, less adversarial way. Is that how?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the idea of the dispute board and the various sort of CAP panels that you get. I mean, when there is a dispute, I mean, you don't necessarily have to fight the dispute to a resolution and get a decision. The key idea for me was sort of conflict avoidance way dispute boards work, or other panels, is to try and see whether there's a scope to get some form of agreement. I mean, you might be narrowing the parameters of the dispute, or you might be looking to solve a whole host of issues together, which enables you to deal with the key issue that's causing a problem. But there are going to be other things that you can bring in to the overall solution, which benefits the project moving forward and helps you avoid, ending up in court or arbitration, which is not a good idea for any project.
No, absolutely. So watch this space for that. So just as obviously, of course, one of the primary aims and outputs of the coalition is the promotion of the pledge, and those who have signed it are sort of fully signed up members of the coalition. Why would you say, if someone were to ask you, why is it important to be so actively involved in supporting the coalition? What does that look like? How could we, those that are signed up, how can you influence people to sign the pledge? What advice would you give? I
mean, it's all about, I suppose, it's all about changing attitudes, all about changing perspectives, as Len said earlier. But it's also about creating awareness. So we, the way we act, the way we, the way we approach things. I mean, the simple answer to your question is that from time to time I go and speak at conferences, whether it's in the UK and also internationally. The coalition does have an international group for those sort of headed by Paul Taggart, for those who sort of work on international projects. And pretty much every conference I speak at, I talk about the work of the coalition and just stress the importance of dispute avoidance. And where you can, you give the practical examples. Most recently, there was an event for TEXA, the UK Construction Solicitors Association. It was a conference for adjudicators. Obviously, adjudicators are there to resolve disputes. But the point I was making to them is that we'll actually, think about what can be done to actually avoid there being a dispute in the first place. And the idea, just as we're looking to arrange an event with the SCL, the idea is to arrange an event with TEXA as well, to talk directly to the legal side, the lawyer side of all this, but the lawyers are just, one group of people that need persuading, one group of people that need encouraging, and I think you do it by, so it's being awareness by showing to people why these things work, why they are a benefit to them. And and the best way often is events like this where people like Jim can talk about, well, this is what happened on my project and this is how my project benefited. And then you see employer owner organizations not just signing up to the pledge but actively endorsing the pledge and incorporating some of the ideals or some of the principles behind the pledge in their contracts.
Yeah, it's satisfying. It must be satisfying to see. What would you say is the I mean, you would imagine, speaking to lawyers and possibly adjudicators, the introduction of the concept of conflict avoidance and avoiding disputes altogether might be considered not in their best interests, perhaps financially, taking disputes out of the hands of the lawyers and putting it into these into conflict avoidance professionals' hands. What are you finding? Is that the sort of feedback you're getting? Is that the sense that you're getting, that people are opposed to this initially, or not?
Well, I mean, that's right up to a point. If there are no disputes, then there's no need for adjudicators to resolve the disputes. But if you're minimizing the disputes, then you're encouraging the performance on construction projects across, and if the construction industry, the construction projects, construction landscape is working better, then there is still a need, or there's still a role for lawyers. It's just that the role changes. And, that there are a number of law firms, super experienced construction law firms, not just mine, others, and there are other lawyers who work with the coalition. And we're a construction professional. I think there's a trend. You don't see yourself necessarily as a lawyer. Ideally you want to be part of the project. You want to be, and there's a future there, and it's a much better future than getting involved, sort of stuck in disputes and stuff.
Yeah, that's a really refreshing point, I think, to take forward, and probably a good point to end on in terms of my questions for you. But I think, Richard, you've got your hand up. Is that a legacy hand or a fresh question?
I've always got my hand up. So I think what I would just like to comment on is that very last question about the expertise of adjudicators and construction lawyers and so on. Most of that is actually predicated at the end of projects. And I think one of our ambitions is to bring that expertise into the front end of projects, because we see the failures when they do come in front of us as tribunals. And actually, we pretty much know that the patterns repeat themselves around governance, around common areas. Every now and again, you find something very rare that really is something that's totally unexpected. But those old Clause 12 claims on the ICE contracts and the more recent ones around unexpected conditions, we tend to not, using the NEC now, we won't there won't be many arguments about weather, because we actually specify what weather is within and without the contract. So I think the ambition really is to bring a lot of this expertise into the front end and inform clients who make decisions that this expertise can be used at the front end and it's valuable, and we should be paying lawyers and other experts at the front end to get it right, when the cost will be so much less than at the end. I don't think anyone is saying construction lawyers and other professionals don't have value. It's actually maximising that value. And it's often the reluctance of clients to spend too much at the front end of projects. Never mind or getting the contracts right. Some are not worried about ground conditions. As an engineer, I'd always say, well, before you dig a hole in the ground, you need a few boreholes to understand what's out there. But sometimes there's a huge amount of risk that's taken on unnecessarily. I don't know if there are any final questions or comments. in the chat. Is there anyone that wants to? Catherine, I see you've made a comment there. Would you like to just expand a little?
Yeah, sorry, I was just saying what Jeremy was saying was sort of resonating, and I think there are always going to be disputes and disagreements, and it's not about avoiding them entirely, it's about avoiding the conflict, if I'm understanding right as to what we're trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
Appreciate, again, I'm new, but it's how you unlock those disputes and disagreements in a healthy, mature way, rather than getting embroiled into conflict, which is not healthy. And I was just saying, I welcome the CAP as an alternative way of doing it. I've previously done it by agreeing collaborative adjudications, and actually that's with the EA, who may or may not be on here right now, but we've done that previously and just agreed that in a collaborative way. So I think it can be off-putting when you're saying it's avoiding from lawyers, but also clients, avoiding conflict avoiding disputes entirely. But I don't think that's what we're saying. I think we're saying avoid the conflict part of that dispute and how you resolve it in a mature, healthy way.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that entirely. And one of the the difficult ways is, well, how do you prove the benefit of this? How do you prove that it actually works? I mean, sort of cold hard stats are actually quite difficult to come by when you're talking about collaboration. You're talking about dispute avoidance. King's College London carried out some research into the effectiveness of dispute boards, and that came out at the end of 2024. And one of the relevant stats there, I think is particularly relevant to the issues that we're talking about this morning, related to the impact of dispute boards on dispute avoidance, conflict avoidance, and the parties who were responding saying where a dispute board was able to work with them to promote conflict avoidance, most of the time, majority of the time, two things happened. One, either the dispute was removed entirely, or two, as you've suggested, Catherine, the dispute was refined. It was able to be sort of resolved in a much less adversarial way, which is much better for sort of relationships for the project moving forward. And I think it's exactly sort of the type of thing looking to achieve for sort of conflict avoidance.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Jeremy, and thank you everyone for being on the call. I'm just going to see if I can share my screen. Is that possible, Yitzhak?
Yeah, should be able to.
So I think I just wanted to flag that we do have a number of organisations that support us, from the House of Parliament Restoration Project, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, the ICE, the RIBA, RICS, and so on. And they support our aims, and they support this lobbying. We are a coalition, so we do have to respect those differences and try and coalesce around the areas that we do agree. And I think very much that one of making contracts simpler and avoiding the temptation to add things at the end that the supply chain doesn't always understand. I'm showing now our programme for the conference. We're looking for commitments, particularly from sponsors who can buy tickets, get their name on the programme, contribute to discussions like this. That will generally be done at either a £1,750 level or a £5,000 level, which, given that we don't take any membership fees or anything, it's the model that we think is most appropriate. We may need to change that model in the future, but for the moment, our view is that that's the best way of being independent and neutral and having a voice and being able to lobby and say things that some organisations might find a bit uncomfortable. So if you can support us on the conference, that'd be great. We'll be doing another one of these sessions in a month's time. I think it's 5 weeks, the Tuesday after Easter. We'll put all information into a newsletter and flyers. So do sign up. You can sign up to get on our newsletter. You don't have to sign the pledge. We realise that there are many organisations that have signed up and they have tens of thousands of people working for them. Just go onto our homepage and put your name and address, email address in, and we'll send you notifications for these events and for our newsletter. Otherwise, I'll end by thanking Len, Jim, and Gisela and Jeremy for all they've done in this morning's event, which has gone through very, very quickly from my particular perspective, and also to thank the RICS in particular, who've been the background and the engine room for many years with this initiative, and actually providing a lot of support in terms of background administration and even the conference. If you do buy a ticket, it will be through the RICS, so they're effectively a gold standard sponsor for doing all that work on a gratis basis with great people like Gisela and Martin. So thanks to you all, and I'll see some of you in the next few days at various meetings, and others in a month's time or so. Thank you. Good morning.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks. Bye.